Hi, welcome back, everyone. So we're at the top of the hour and we're ready to join the panel. Where do we go from here? And this particular panel is going to help synthesize what we've covered so far throughout these sessions and talk about what's next for us. And so my fellow CI fellow, August Jackson, will be moderating the session with another CI fellow, Elise Nockels, and the Skip Board of Director member Jay Nakagawa. So over to you, August.
Hey, Cynthia, thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone, from what I hope was a very productive networking break. Thank you so much for joining me, Elise and Jay. For quick introductory purposes, as a reminder, you all saw me yesterday. I'm the Senior Director of Market and Competitive Intelligence at Deltek. For anybody who does not know what Deltek is, we are a software and solutions company that provides software and solutions to project-focused organizations in government contracting, architecture and engineering, marketing and advertising agencies, and consulting firms. This is a great company to work for if you are interested in competitive intelligence, because we operate in some very dynamic competitive markets. It's been about 20 years that I've been doing competitive intelligence in the telecommunications and IT and government contracting technology industries and professional services industries. So I have a lot of background and experience in applying competitive intelligence in a technology context. And I'm excited to ask my two panelists to introduce themselves, who also have a similar veteran experience in technology, not necessarily telecommunications. But Jay, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, happy to do that. Thanks, August. I'm Jay Nakagawa, and I work for Dell Technologies. I've been doing the competitive intelligence as a specialty, if you will, for about the last 10 years. Prior to that, most of my time was spent in product management. And of course, for those of you who know about product management, we do spend a lot of time analyzing the competition because we own the product. We're trying to figure out where to go, where the markets are going, valid opportunities versus invalid ones. So I've been doing this for a while, and my kids like to tease me. I was around when the dinosaurs were still roaming the earth. So been doing this for a while, and I'll turn over to Elise now.
Hey, so I really hate that I've hit veteran status. That's
sorry
scary and horrible at the same time. But you're accurate. I've been doing this for the same period of time these guys have. Probably 15, 20 years. But math is hard, so I don't like to count that high. I'm currently running the CI program at Elastic. I just joined 6 months ago, building a program from the ground up. But my previous stints in CI have been, primarily at McAfee. Spent 10 and a half years there. The McAfee Intel debacle. And then I went to Tanium for a couple of years and did a small stint in the CI consulting world at Sedulu. So I've been around the block doing this for a while. And I've been in high tech my entire life. So I love this conference is because it's combining my two loves, CI and tech. Yep. So I think I share that with both August and Jay, all very much tech people. So happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely agree on that. Loving what we're hearing at this conference. It's bringing together so many of the things that we do love and love to prognosticate about, talk about, and because we're users and we're practitioners and we're kind of pundits in technology as well. Coming into this panel, I really had two purposes when we put this panel together and we constituted what it would be, where we would be at this point in the summit. And the opportunity that we would have here and with these particular panelists. The first is to check in on what we've heard. We've covered a lot of topics. We've talked about a lot of things related to technology and artificial intelligence and things like the metaverse, which might be a new topic for a lot of people. I can tell I'm already getting Elise wound up on this. And so this would be just a great point to check in on what we've heard. And then also, because we are, the three of us, technology veterans as well, and applying CI in technology fields, we have a distinct perspective that we can begin to formulate points of view on, okay, where is all of this going? What comes next? And that's both as technology pundits as well as people who are ostensibly going to be using CI for competitive intelligence in the future as well. So I'll, and request for the audience to please make this as interactive as possible. Once your questions, once your comments. I've got a long list of questions for these great panelists, but this is, absolutely going to be a free form. The three of us know one another very well, and we'll see if we get more than one question deep into my planned set of questions. But that's, the purpose of this panel is for that free form discussion. So I'd really invite everybody to participate and, share what they're hearing, agreeing, disagreeing with. So let me put it out there. And Jay, I'll start with you.
Okay.
What have you heard so far that really stood out for you?
If I think about yesterday and even the sessions this morning, I think they've all been pretty riveting in their own way. I think the thing that really strikes me is that technology is still evolving. We're not at the point and let me put it this way. The whole thing around the terms like AI, ML, and knowledge systems and predictive analytics, there's still more of a promise than a reality. I mean, certainly the systems are out there that can help facilitate that. But I think everybody's looking, as you said, August, for the magic bot that says coordinate everybody's calendar. It doesn't exist today. It's still, we are the bot, so we're still having to do that. I think even with predictive analytics and predictive technologies, there are great tools out there that can help facilitate that. They gather and aggregate information very well, but still requires that human intervention, the application of us as human beings to filter out what's noise, what's real, what's false positives. And to me, that's still going to be a huge hurdle that we're going to have to overcome in order to reach this, panacea we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Elise, over to you. Same question.
Can I just say what Jay said?
Sure. Yeah.
I agree. I think that there's a lot we learned, or we heard a lot about like more academic. I thought that a lot of and this is not a slam on the presenters and the content, but I felt like a lot of what we heard so far seems like what Jay said. It's the academic / theoretical / could possibly be, but we are not there yet. And I do think that we are a long ways from it. And I am highly skeptical we'll ever get there, to be honest. And that could just be because I'm old and I've been doing this manually for so long that I don't want to admit my job could be done effectively by a computer or a bot or an AI engine. But I think that, I'm a little worried that we might be putting too much faith potentially in technology to help us do more of the more advanced things. I love one of the lines that we heard earlier was that you could use AI ML tool sets to cut out some of the mundane, boring tasks, things that are very, laborious, that take a lot of time, but they're the less impactful things that if it got screwed up and went sideways, you're not going to lose your job and your company's not going to go under because of it. But if you have some kind of technology that is now telling you what markets to invest in or what company to buy, those big strategic things that we all have to battle and we have to try to make those decisions. Oh God, I am not putting that in the hands of technology. And this is coming from a person that's been in technology her whole entire career. Hell no, am I doing that? I am not trusting it. So I'm coming at this, I think, very much with the more skeptical, the asshole in the back of the room, kind of going back and saying, yeah, I'm not buying all this quite yet. But I thought that it's the possibilities are interesting. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. One of the things that has more credibility with me is the potential for the application of these technologies to begin to kind of eat away at the heavy lifting. So for example, whenever I'm performing any sort of data analysis, bringing things over from our CRM system and comparing that to insights from our win-loss interviews and those sorts of things, there's a tremendous amount of manual work that still goes into that, but that the volume and the nature of the work seems like it's ready for some automation. One of the reasons I talk about the scheduling bot as kind of my wish list is that's something that eats up a tremendous amount of time, but really adds no real value for competitive intelligence. So that's and seems like it's something that you just build me a bot. Come on, Jay, Dell can build us a bot.
We probably could. It's one of those things, though. And during the break, the three of us were talking. There's a lot of VC money out there trying to be invested in AI and ML and predictive. And the problem is, as we were talking, there's a lot of people who have money out there, which is a good thing. It helps, with our industry, and certainly get more attention, because if you use the follow the money rule, it's obviously going to be an emerging area, which is good for us and our jobs and everything. But at the same time, I think a lot of these VCs are being led down a rosy path without any reality checks. And I think that's where part of our experience collectively comes into play, because when we start hearing about these things, part of it's a closed loop. We need to get back with our vendor partners and technologists, say, here's what we need versus what they think we need. It's just they make a lot of assumptions, as we all do. But personally, I've found that a lot of times for these technology products out there available for us, there's a lot of assumptions built in that just don't materialize. They're built for a specific purpose that the developer or visionary had for it, but doesn't apply really very well in our real situations. So it's more of an idealistic type of approach.
Yeah, and you got to feel bad for some of the new folks coming into competitive, because if they don't have that, the war scars that some of us have from having to do this work the hard way, they could be lured into some of those fallacies and feel like they could get a quick win by buying a tool that does all of it for them, because they're flat out lied to. And I think that's part of our responsibility is the CI fellows, people who've been in the industry for a while, to help mentor those folks and make sure they don't make those mistakes, because that's terrifying. If someone comes into a career, they're asked, like, we were talking on the break about how many job opportunities there are just in building CI programs in tech at startups, because VC is not just hitting CI firms, it's hitting everything. Primarily,
that's a great point.
It's huge, and there's tons of companies trying to build out CI programs, and they're looking for anyone, literally any warm body, to run this damn thing. And that person's going in there, I don't know what the hell CI is, but this tool, this company is telling me that they could do the work for me, and I could just basically sit back. And holy, this could get ugly fast if we don't, kind of help those companies either stop what they're doing, give them better, insights as to what competitive work needs to be done, how to actually, what to really say and what to really do with these tools. I think that's part of our responsibility as a community, is to get them on board and not lead people down these dark, horrible, scary paths.
Well,
and I think
go ahead.
Go ahead,
August.
Nope, you.
I was just going to say that, we've all been around this for a while, and part of the issue I think we've seen, especially in the last 5 years, is where there used to be people who would do like aggregation of news sources, and that was kind of the early CI type of thing. RSS feeds. I know August and I are both fans of Feedly, which are is a really good, nice tool. But today there's so many vendors out there claiming things. It's really hard to get away from what's real, or for those of you old enough to remember what's real and what's Memorex, because everybody's claiming the same thing. They almost all sound alike. So how do you disseminate between one vendor's claims versus another's claims? Because all of that POC and testing takes time. And I think, the three of us go through a lot of technology because we get pitched it a lot by different vendors. But this is a great example of where the CI fellow members can, we all rely upon each other to exchange information. Hey, what did you see from vendor X? How did it work? Because we've all got those battle scars and gone through that. And we can probably help some of the younger folks, as Elise was mentioning, avoid some of those battle scars that they don't necessarily need to incur. Now, of course, this is always kind of a trust but verify, because each use case is going to be a little bit different. But certainly, we've got a whole bunch of great experienced members within this organization.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree, and I want to pick up on a theme, Jay, from what you just said, as well as the conversation, Elise, that you and Phil just had in the chat as well, because I think this touches on a really important and interesting point. Elise, I think you're spot on that you're talking about, let's say, somebody who's put into a position as leading or building a CI function at a company, that probably has never had a CI function before, and either them or their executives have been maybe sold on the panacea of a technological solution that's going to, allow them to take care of everything. And maybe that person not having the experience or the background or the knowledge to have the appropriate amount of skepticism about that, and to communicate that with their executives as well. I do think Phil makes an interesting point. I suspect you might actually agree with this too, that there is a lot of new blood in the profession, and that's actually, I think really positive, because that's as somebody who, all those years ago, I was one of those young whippersnappers too, and you brought in, bust some preconceptions that the people who were veterans at the time had about the profession, and that is one of the that's how paradigms shift, and the scientific revolution and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'll be the first one to admit that I'm one of the most jaded people you'll ever meet. So no argument there.
Hope you're not suggesting we're cadavers in motion there, August.
Oh, no, nothing of the sort. Cadavers in motion. That was a really great point. I thought, I mean, Rashad, that was fantastic. And having seen his Google Talk before, I knew what we were in for, and he absolutely delivered that and beyond. I thought that was fantastic, and I thought the conversation he and Suki had was so really powerful and insightful, and I think an important point too. So maybe I can pick up on a thread from that, because I have observed throughout my career, and I've tried very hard to not be this person where you do stop learning, or you draw a line in the sand. I'm not going to apply any new tools or technology to my competitive intelligence practice. And I remember when social was new, when social media like Twitter and LinkedIn were new, and some very prominent veteran voices in the profession just made it very clear, no, we are not using this. This is not applicable. And I don't know how I could do my job without LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's such a powerful secondary resource tool, but it enables the primary intelligence practice, and feels very much old hat at this point. Do the two of you have any examples from your careers where something was kind of rejected by the establishment at first, but is now kind of de rigueur?
Good question.
We're actually going backwards in some instances.
I agree.
Back in the day,
Mhm.
I'll keep the company out of the discussion, but you can probably figure who it was. We built a competitive intelligence lab. We were bringing competitor products in. We were testing and benchmark, doing all those things, and we have now that was accepted practice. Now what we're finding in tech is that that's not an accepted practice anymore. So I'm because there's UL restrictions, there's things that prevent those exact kinds of tests happening. So I feel like we went back in time a little bit there. But I've never really encountered a technology bit, like a technology that we wanted to incorporate that our company wasn't behind, or that leadership and sponsorship wasn't behind it. But that could just simply be that I've been fortunate to be in organizations that haven't really second guessed the decisions of the CI team. That might be part of it. Being that I've always built programs from the ground up, I haven't had to step in the shoes of someone who had built a program and then try to do things differently. And you have that little bit of friction about, well, that's not how we've always done it. I mean, I never had that. That's how we've always done it, because it never was done before. So I guess I don't have a great example for you, August. I'm sorry. Jay, do you have anything?
The only one that comes to mind is I've seen this not only with people I talk with, within the community, but even to a certain extent, pre-Dell acquisition days for us, there were programs that people had built that measure things that would certainly be questionable. like the service times. In the end, if you're winning a deal, if it takes 2 days versus 4 days, in my opinion, it's a little bit of a who cares. That's an arbitrary SLA. I'm more interested in the result. But yeah, I see that always trying to, we got rid of that, and we found different ways to measure success. Service time is one component, but it was really focused in early on as that being the component. We eliminated that. It's now one data point, but you still see a faction out there of executives, not necessarily within my company, but executives who focus in almost obsessively on things like that, as if that's going to be the real measurement. And in fact, it should be, in my opinion, more focused on the result versus, how soon did we service a request, because it doesn't matter if you didn't win. It doesn't matter if you got 99.9% service level objectives being met if you're still losing revenue on a continuous basis.
And how does that experience with key performance indicators translate into the CI practice?
For us, it's one metric, so we try and figure out, what is our average service time, and that's really just more of, are we responding back to our stakeholders in a timely fashion?
Okay.
But that's the only measurement that has. We have other KPIs we use, such as the deal size, or win-loss ratios, number of competes by product line per quarter on a rolling basis. What's the heat map look like for having one of our competitors partnering up with another competitor to go after a deal?
Mm-hmm.
So we look at all these different variables, but the SLA is just one component. And what we're finding is that, and this came up yesterday a little bit with the visualization too, is if you're able to properly produce reports that give the right visualization, you don't have to explain it. It becomes pretty apparent. And so I think for us, having good visualization is taken away from the SLA discussion.
That's a great point. Yeah, and I remember in the chat you brought up visualizations as well, and that's one of the applications of some of these technologies that I've been particularly interested in, and also very interested in KPIs and ROI of competitive intelligence as well, and they're somewhat related. At least it looks like you've got some thoughts there.
Oh, I've always said that if you're asked for ROI on CI, you've already lost your job. You might as well leave the company. I honestly, I feel like that's a lost battle. It's always to say, be proactive and show value right up front. That way you never ask for that. I'm exaggerating, guys. If you are asked for ROI, do not quit your job. Do not, run away. But just know that you're going to have to now build that trust, as opposed to trying to if you maintain it up front, you're never going to ask that question.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you get into some opportunities too, for what I'll call qualitative metrics as well. So, delivering value up front right away. One of the things I've always found very, very useful is when you're trying to evaluate the success of a competitive intelligence function, to have a mix of qualitative and quantitative data points. And I've never tried to measure the ROI, just because it's there are so many hands in every opportunity, because if we're talking about, pursuit support or some sort of, some form of, sales oriented competitive intelligence, can you say that competitive intelligence won that particular deal, or, how would you? Maybe that's something technology can help us with, but I kind of doubt it.
There's actually a tool. I won't say who. There is a tool that can tell you that. I'm a skeptic. I don't know if I fully trust it, but that's one of the potential fallacies that the CI vendor world is telling the professionals, that they can go back and tie back to actual how many wins, what's your win rate per who used what technology or what competitive intelligence. And it sounds compelling, but if you're going to base your ROI and your value on that, that's another dangerous proposition.
Well, and I think that's a great point there, Elise, because I think, it's not hard and fast numbers. It's more of correlations by implication, so that there's a correlation saying that, we believe that we've impacted this, and here are some numbers that help substantiate that. But as far as if somebody actually says, well, prove to me every number and prove that's true, there isn't a system in the world that I'm aware of today that can actually do that, because there are too many disparate systems that you're trying to interlock data from one system to another, to another, to another. And so it's by implication and triangulation that you reach these type of conclusions.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's actually, that triangulation and the multi data sources that you're talking about there, Jay. The diversity of the data sources out there, and the data structures and the data hierarchies and those sorts of things. I have to admit, early on in my career, that was one of the areas where I was really expecting artificial intelligence and other forms of technology to really help us overcome that. But I still, my sense is, somebody who's still struggling with, huge amounts of data from multiple sources, that, business in general and competitive intelligence in particular is still really challenged with that. Are there any specific examples, and Elise, I'll throw this over to you first, or anything that you're in particular struggling with, or solutions that you may have found to address any of that?
I have I don't know if anyone else is impacted by this, but when Google kind of decided to shit the bed a couple weeks ago with Google Alerts, did anybody else hit with that? Because I monitor probably a couple hundred competitors on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And I use Google Alerts as one of my feeds to come in, just as everyone probably uses Google Alerts. And all of my feeds, no matter whether it was Feedly or it was Innorator or any other tool, were all very sporadic and dead. Nothing was coming in. I'm like, this isn't right. So I was forced to I was using technology to do my job. I had set an SLA with my internal teams that I was going to deliver a weekly, newsletter update report every Wednesday. It was my cadence, and I had everything die on me. Now, that's an example of technology putting all our eggs in the technology basket, and how that can be hugely consequence, or it could be a consequence of it. So anyway, I had to go and do manual distribution, collection of intel, and it was painful, super painful. It took me way longer than it should have, because I didn't have tools to help me. But I still had to deliver that report, because how do you explain to your stakeholders, well, sorry, all my feeds are dead? They're not going to get that. So that's a huge problem, because we put a reliance on technology, and when it fails us, our internal stakeholders don't understand that. And so they're looking for those bits of insights. And if you can't deliver them, regardless of how you're collecting it, now it's on you, person. You can't blame the technology. So I don't know if that answered your question. I'm going to lit on a soapbox there, because I just lived this nightmare a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know if anyone else did, but it was horrible. And it was a great reminder that you have to have backup plans. And understanding of how to do this work, and not rely on even for the most mundane tasks.
That's a great point. Jay?
Yeah, I guess from my standpoint, the area of technology that I think is still a really open field, green field, if you will, for people who are smart, obviously much smarter than I am, but have the opportunity to understand the dynamics. I've had a different experience when it comes to social, and normally what I'm interested in from my standpoint is, tell me from a social media standpoint where we have opportunities coming up that people are really unhappy with our competitor. It could be a particular product, it could be services, it could be maintenance work, it could be their professional services, and there are some really good tools out there from what I can gather today, that if you want to monitor your own social media, that's fine. You get to hear, it's a little bit of the echo chamber, because you get to hear exactly what you want to hear. But I want to hear what's going on with the competitors and what their customers are thinking about them. And I still haven't found a good tool after about 3, maybe 4 years of looking. And so I keep, waiting for the vendor to knock on my door, say, hey, we've got your problem solved. It's kind of like your version of your calendar bot there, August.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be high on my wish list too. Is something that makes sense of in particular commentary around an offering or a product. Jay, you've actually got a question in the chat that I'll bring here. Kelly asks if you can talk more about the competitor heat map, and yeah, I was kind of interested in that too.
Okay, and we don't use any. I'll talk about that. Just so you know, we don't use anything special in terms of it's not homegrown technology. Essentially, we get information. So let me take a step back. We're a big user of things like Salesforce.com, And what we've done within Salesforce is we have actually orchestrated additional fields into it. So we have primary competitor for hardware, secondary competitor for hardware, primary competitor for software, secondary for software. We have use case. So is it a Microsoft Office app? Is it a backup application? What is the different use cases? We also have one that talks about, win-loss information. So we've orchestrated a lot of this data to go into Salesforce. And, fortunately, we've got a great sales organization who understands the value of collecting that data. So by virtue that we actually can collect that data either on a monthly, weekly, daily, or more commonly in our case for quarterly QBRs, we gather that information. So we're able to see, okay, like software vendor B is partnering with hardware vendor A, and we can see through that heat map using things like Microsoft Power BI or Tableau or Domo. We can actually create those heat maps so we can say, look at this. We're starting to see that there's a partnership forming here. They're going to market. And, as, other speakers have said, is that an opportunity to find a way? I think maybe you said it too, August, is this an interesting way to find a way to suck the air out of, the oxygen out of the room, to create problems or put disruptions in their way to kind of make that a more difficult go-to-market partner in situation than it is today. So that's what we do from a heat map standpoint.
Okay, and another question related to that, and appreciate both of your perspectives on this. And I'll frame it very broadly. What are some of the ways, as we have these systems to capture this sort of data and even analyze it? And I'll just share from my own experience here is it's actually been kind of a challenge to get members of the organization to submit the appropriate data or to share the appropriate data. Any challenges, any successes in particular, maybe you have, or advice you have for me or for anybody in the audience about what are some of the ways you socialize, through an organization, the practice of sharing the information that becomes competitive intelligence?
So are we talking about the collection of internal knowledge, or is it more of what part of itself?
Yeah, so I can actually give a very specific example. So Jay, we've done something very similar in our CRM system as well, where we are asking for reps in particular to designate the primary competitor and also additional competitors on an opportunity. And I'll just say it's been a challenge to socialize that as a standard practice. And one of the I can speak from previous B2B experiences as well. That's always been a challenge to get reps first and foremost to think, is there a competitor? But then also when there is a competitor, hey, there's a benefit to you and a benefit to the rest of the business for sharing this.
Yeah, I think, okay, now I understand what you're talking about. Yeah, I think every time you try to do a win-loss program that comes up, that is the top issue, is trying to get sales to share. And the way I've always done it is if you share first, if you show the value of what you're trying to put together. So it's a lot of work up front. So if you're brand new trying to start this out, you got to figure out what pieces you can pull together to show what you're capable of doing. Because in a lot of times your sales teams don't understand what you're trying to do. A lot of them think that you're going out and evaluating their performance. And they get kind of very protective over that data, that customer, that client. So what I've always done is tried to show an example of what I'm trying to do, or, an analysis to say, if I had this piece of the puzzle, I could tell you all these things about how best to go after that new customer, that new prospect. So it's really kind of sharing the possibility with them so they better understand what you're doing with that data, and making it very clear that you're not trying to evaluate performance, and there's no, there'll be no back talk necessarily back to their management about how they're actually doing. This is really just to help the business.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that one, Elise. We were very fortunate. We start off very small with a specific group within the company, sales organization. So we orchestrate a very small part of the total company. And from there, because we agreed to not have it go down to the granular level of a rep, but more at the macro level, at the business, at the BU level, it gives once we were able to show our sales stakeholders and executives what was going on, they were going like, oh, we can use this to run the business. And from there, sales management can go in and figure out who their high performers or lower performers are. That's not our job. Our job is to say, okay, here's how we're competing against vendors X and Y and Z. Here's the comparative numbers. Here's what the win-loss ratios are. And so we don't try and add coloration to what our performance is. Rather, we try to say, here are some things we know about the competition that we believe are affecting this quarter. And so we keep it very neutral in that way. It doesn't become a accusatory type of environment. It's more, and the sales leadership and executives have learned, oh, this is a way for us to better manage our business. So it's becoming incorporated as part of our standard operating processes nowadays.
Yeah, those are all great examples, and I think illustrate too the importance of something that's come up, a topic that's come up a couple of times in the previous sessions, the idea of the human in the loop as well. And it's a slightly different take on it, maybe from how some of our earlier panelists and presenters were intending that to be, but it is an important example, and I think we'll within the CI profession, we'll actually probably maintain that level of importance. One of the trends I've observed in CI tech recently is there seems actually to be a lot of VC money going after win-loss as a challenge as well. And I'm wondering if either of you are seeing that and have any thoughts on that.
I mean, they're definitely adding tool sets and making it a little bit, easier to pull some of that data. I mean, one example is there's survey tools. Salesforce has it built in if you're using that as your CRM, where you can survey a rep out as soon as they close an opportunity. Like we had a rule in a previous company where if you were going to close the opportunity, you were not allowed to close it, even failed one or closed. Didn't matter. You had to fill out the survey and ask key questions. I mean, I'll admit that tool in Salesforce is very hard to manage, and you have to be very much best friends with your Salesforce admin folks, because there's a lot of, like, you imagine like all the things that you want to ask can change over time, especially if you're in a high or like dynamic industry where your questions may change, the competition may change, that becomes hard to manage. There are other tools that plug into Salesforce that do the similar thing, that gives the control to the CI practitioner, so you can make those edits on the fly, and then that data then can get pumped into a Tableau, a Power BI, or other tool to do cool graphics, year-over-year trends, all those things. That's one of the main ones that I've seen from a investment coming into specifically into win-loss.
Yeah, I think probably Ellen Naylor is probably the one of the best in the business on that, and so she probably can give her perspective on the chat. But certainly, I'm seeing when I'm contacted by VCs or other people who are interested in putting in like add-on features to Salesforce and marketing it as their own, win-loss is becoming a big component of that. And I think what they're really trying to focus in on is how do we get that win-loss data into interviews without it, having to go to the customer and get the information. And because that's where I've always found sales kicks back is like, well, I don't want you talking to my customer. Maybe they're going to say something bad about me, or they're going to say something bad about we didn't do something with another product, et cetera, et cetera. But win-loss data, I think, is really a key for improvement, not only from the sales motion, but also from a product standpoint, because there are really important information that can come out of that. But if you're not finding a way to get that data, then you're really kind of cheating yourself. But it does seem like a lot of the tools now are starting to focus on that aspect of it. But again, if you look at it from the broader perspective of what this conference has been talking about, it's an incremental improvement, in my opinion. It's not one of those big rocks that are going to get you to the next big hurdle. It's an incremental improvement that will help things out, but it's not the next big thing.
That's a great point. One of the questions I would like to pose to each of you, and Elise, I'll put you on the spot first. Is there anything that you feel should be coming up in these panels and in these keynotes for the summit so far that we haven't addressed?
I think it's what happens when technology is not there. We're not talking about that. We're all talking about the grandiose ideas of what we could do with it. But I am the massive skeptic, for those who know me, and I'm waiting for the power grid to collapse, the internet to die. So this whole concept of metasphere, this crap that Facebook is spouting, I don't believe it, because I do believe that we're going to hit a major issue with either it is the power grid or it is our internet. I mean, from a cybersecurity perspective, we've got several countries that are looking to take us down from a nation state perspective. So anyone living in a world thinking that we're going to actually get to a metasphere, I love the world you live in. I want to play in that, but I can't. I'm too much of a realist and realizing that we may not get there. So I feel like something that we need to be considering is, how do we do our jobs when that technology is not there? That was not covered in this session, nor I don't think it was even planned to be, but that's something that we should be considering, especially folks who are newer in their careers, who are relying on more and more tech than some of the folks that maybe have more dinosaur like roots in CI. I think that's something that we should, really all be considering. And I did not see that really addressed here.
Okay, great point. Jay?
Yeah, August, I think the thing I've kind of reached a conclusion on about this conference so far is that a lot of the topics, you take a look at what, we just heard from Charlene and Olga as an example, or from Antonia yesterday. I think these are all starting blocks to have different, deeper dives into it. And that's the thing I find really exciting about this, is I think it kicked off a really great set of discussions around each of these topic areas. But, just like you were saying about, what about the book club? Well, we have a book club around some of these topics, so to speak. And I think that's a great idea, because I think there's a lot more levels to dive into. And personally, I enjoy the sharing of information and from other members of this organization. So I think there's a lot of good G2 within the group. I would just love to see that, share more of that, and take a deeper dive into each one of these.
Yeah, absolutely spot on, and definitely want to echo that sentiment, Jay, because the intention certainly behind this summit was to go both broader and deeper on the intersection of competitive intelligence and technology that really any other venue has the opportunity to do. SCIP is great at what they do, but in a 2-day conference that's trying to do a lot of things, it can't do just this. And there's really no other place to do just this. And I will say, personally, there's been a couple of different venues where I've tried to kick off similar conversations, and I'm really pleased to see the apparent traction this topic is getting, in the chat and in the community of practice and elsewhere, because it's been a little bit frustrating to try to have these deeper discussions about implications and a healthy dose of skepticism, like what Elise brings to the conversation, and and kind of have people like, well, I just thought you were going to talk about Feedly for 2 days or something like that, and I was like, no, there's not enough there to talk about it. So yeah, absolutely agree. And the book club is there in the community of practice now. We're going to start with Rashad's book, and if it's as good as Ellen Naylor says it is, and as good as Suki Fuller says it is, and as good as Google Talk, please go do yourself a treat and watch that thing. That's going to be a great discussion. And then I think we've already got book number 2 in the form of Kathy O'Neill's Weapons of Math Destruction as well. She's a very healthy skeptic of the power of algorithms, and is always something to keep in mind, that these are things built by humans and based very often on human data that comes from a very biased world, and all too often tends to actually reconstitute human bias in kind of like a mathematically justified form. So that's kind of the dimension of my skepticism around technology as well. But with that in mind, so great answers both on these questions, and Elise, I think your cybersecurity point is really quite spot on as well, because that's a topic that I think one of the panels touched on yesterday, but we haven't spoken about a lot. Traditionally and historically, competitive intelligence was one of those quintessential on-premise activities. And now, particularly anything that's enabled by AI is almost by definition delivered in a cloud infrastructure because nobody has enough GPUs on premise to do AI. And so I'm just very wary of the cybersecurity implications and what that means for our profession. I'm sure, Elise, you have a point of view there as well.
Well, it's not a great point of view. It's not one that's fun and fuzzy. It's one of terrifying nature. I mean, if you think about it, the cloud providers are Google, Microsoft, and AWS. All three of those companies more than likely will, if not already, compete with you. Especially if you're looking at AWS, that company is literally going after any greenfield it possibly can, and it could go after your industry tomorrow. I happen to live in cybersecurity, so all three play in that bucket. By putting your data in their cloud, you're basically handing over all of your intelligence. Now, we have to trust that they're segmenting that, they're protecting it, it's not getting shared, but their data is in their cloud. So how much do you trust every one of those cloud providers to keep your data protected, make sure it's not breached by a competitor, by a nation state, by somebody else, and that it's not shared internally to help their own competitive benefit? Granted, this is a super skeptical view of the world and very dark, but we have to be thinking about those things as we progress into these new technology areas, because that's just, I mean, it's the reality. You can't do a lot of this work anymore simply in your little isolated off network, environment.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think there are some contract terms, in some of those cloud providers which imply that they own a piece of it. They have some rights to ownership, which is really kind of scary, because if it's your proprietary information or your proprietary code has to be executed in the cloud, and their contracts say they own a piece of it, that has some really strong legal ramifications.
Absolutely agree. Well, I see Cynthia has joined us again, and she had some great comments backstage. So maybe she's joining the panel, but she might be giving us the hook as well. But thank you both very much. This has been fantastic.
Well, we're ready for our next panel, but thanks so much for giving us, more thought-provoking ideas. And also what I love is that we're challenging conventions, right? We're not just embracing ideas from the summit, we're questioning these ideas as we should question all of them along the way. And so I really value this in our colleagues, and I look forward to continuing this as well. So thanks so much, August, for leading this group, and for Elise and Jay for getting us, thinking and getting the juices flowing, and just keeping us grounded in the here and now, right?